one of the features of business life during the last few years has been the growing awareness of managers that properly designed information can help them considerably in planning and controlling their own sides of the business. But if information reflects only part of the total picture, decisions based upon it may not be in the best interest of the business as a whole. Conflicts of interest with other functions are likely to occur, and opportunities for profit may be lost. Clearly, there is a need not only for suitable management information, but also for a system which will link up the separate sides of the business. This must be designed to show the overall effect of any decision and subsequently whether objectives are being attained. The purpose of this film is to show how such a management information system can be designed to meet the needs of management and to illustrate its relevance to different business situations. The way in which we propose to do this is by showing you how management information has been used or sometimes misused by the directors of a fictitious company, the Unimix product company, during a critical period of its life. But let me hand you over to the newly appointed chairman of this company.
If I may give you the background to this entirely fictitious company, Unimix is a long-established and respected firm that for nearly half a century has profitably manufactured and marketed its two main product groups, X and Y. But in recent years, this glittering jewel has temporarily lost its luster, and profits have been steadily declining. Some months ago, we were able to take it over at a rock-bottom price, and I was appointed as the new chairman. Now, to help revitalize this company, two colleagues have joined me. Jim is my director of marketing. He's a quiet Scotsman with a wide experience of several companies to draw upon. My production director is Bill, a down-to-earth North Countryman who came up the hard way. My job as chairman, besides looking after finance and administration, is to guide the board toward the right decisions. By the way, please don't expect a model board acting with complete objectivity all the time. Our meetings are, if anything, larger than life, and certainly not demonstrations of ideal board procedures. What they're really intended to do is to illustrate points, even conflicts of interest, which demonstrate the kind of management information needed to run Unimix. Now, in this first of four parts, it is near the close of our financial year, and I have called a board meeting to review the company's position, to start making forward plans, and to see how near we are to launching Product Z, a promising new line which I hope will mark the turning point in the company's fortunes. That is to make a start on looking ahead to next year's plans. I think we've got to, in general terms, agree what our operating policies are going to be and try and fix our financial targets. I think firstly we should see where we are at the moment. In particular, I'm very anxious to see how we're doing on products X and Y. The probability is that we shall want to make some improvements, something which will increase our profitability, and so we can evaluate the various alternatives which are open to us. And then lastly, we can try and put down on paper what our financial target should be for next year. Now, does that strike you as being a reasonable approach?
Yes, I think so.
Right, let's get cracking. Now, in reviewing the current position, Bill, you as our technical director, I think should outline to us how you see the position in the factory. I must admit that I was not very happy when I walked through it the other day. There was a sort of, I thought, a general air of slackness about the place.
Well, I think it depends where you are. On one side of the factory, I think this is true, and if I could outline on this chart. Now, as you know, we at the moment are only working on a single shift system. And as you see, two major areas. We've got the exit plant on this side and the Y-field plant on this side of the factory. It is on the Y-field plant that we have spare capacity at the moment. We're operating, I suppose, only about 50% of the plant. And I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that it was this area that you were looking at when you went round the factory.
I think it probably was. I remember coming in here.
This would account for your impression,
yes,
of course.
Yes.
Now, the Exeter plant comprises something like 100 machines, and this produces only the X product range.
You can't touch the Y.
It can't produce any of the Y product.
No.
And the same applies on the Y-field side, where we have about 125 machines, and this again can only produce the Y product range.
Where are you going to produce product Z, Bill?
Product Z, well, when this comes along, we will be modifying the Y-field plants here, and this will enable us to produce product Z.
And does this mean that this plant will not be able to produce product Y any longer?
Oh, no, that won't be altered. It just means that we shall now have multi-purpose machines instead of single-purpose machines. Now, in addition, of course, to the main processes, we have the ancillary area here, in other words, the service sections, 2 blocks. We have the engineer's workshop, laboratory, development, and my own office in 1 block, and we have the, if you like, the administrative block taking in wages, accounts, costs, planning, and personnel services.
Oh, yes. These are what are usually called direct expenses, in other words. And these are indirect expenses.
That's right. That's what it is. Yes.
Good. Thank you, Bill. Well, it shows, I think, that we've got to rely on maintaining the level of X and increasing the sales of Y and bringing in product Z if we're going to.
Yes.
Now, Jim, as marketing director, would you like to let us know what do you see the position?
As you know, we have the 4 products, X1, X2, Y1 and Y2. All 4 products are distributed nationally. The X products are faced with quite severe competition.
Yeah.
Y products have little competition. What there is fragmented, local. There are no national operators. Quality is up to the standard of other competitive products. Selling prices, by and large, are comparable with our competition, and they are, in fact, as you know, £60 per tonne on all 4 products.
Yes.
Now, so far as the individual products are concerned, I have the graph of sales trends here to give you a bit of sales history. I draw your attention, first of all, to the break in the scale here, which indicates that although X1 looks our most important product, it is much more important than appears from the graph. The estimates here are based on current year costs. Now, X1, we have been declining over the last 2 years. This is the latest estimate for the current year, and this is the position as we would expect to see it next year if we do not change our policies in any way. Product X2 has been rising steadily, and we expect it to continue to rise, and this we attribute to a very favourable price here. We have a definite price advantage on X2.
Oh, that's lucky.
Y products, they have had a steady sale in the past with moderate growth and little competition, but it is a fairly restricted market. Y1, we expect to continue the present upward trend, while Y2, which has already turned slightly downwards, should continue to go down, and this again is a price factor. We are fairly expensively priced in this particular product. So that's the position on each of the products. Looking at the total turnover, the total net sales value is levelling off now, but it's levelling off at an unsatisfactory level, and the situation is now critical, and we've got to do something about our policies.
Well, thank you, Jim. Unfortunately, I have to confirm that we are in a very critical position. Now, the profits of this company, as you know, have been declining over the last few years. And last year, we made a profit of £480,000, just about 8 or 9% on capital employed. Well, we are near enough now to the end of the year for our accounts people to be able to estimate what the profit for this year is going to come out at. And I'm very sorry indeed to say that the profits have virtually disappeared. We're coming out at a figure of something like £10,000.
That's nothing, is it?
Nothing
at all.
Is this all products that contribute to this situation, or is it just 1 or 2?
Let me show you. Here's the chart which they've prepared. Starting off with the sales at the top, these are the figures, Jim, I think that you've shown us on your chart. 120,000.
Yes.
And now we deduct, Bill, from that these direct expenses,
Yes.
relating to that blue area on the plan. Now that leaves us with a gross profit of £1,500,000 approximately. But by the time you see we've deducted the indirect expenses, we're left with this ridiculous figure of £10,000.
It seems very clear, Harry, that this is the root of the problem, the gross margin on these two products here. It's very
X2
low.
and Y1, very low indeed, yes.
Now, surely our production costs must be too high in this.
No, I don't accept that at all, Mr. Chairman. Our production costs are not too high. The main problem is, of course, we've got this low utilization on Y fields, and we're not getting the volume to produce from Jim. I mean, he's got to get his salesmen out selling if we're going to make any impact on this situation.
Well, if you chaps would hurry up and get Z product off the ground, we'd solve this problem in no time.
We're doing this as fast as we possibly can, as you well know.
Don't let's get sort of pushing our own interests. Let's try and take an objective view of this company as a whole. Now, I don't know about you, Jim, but I think that what we've got to do is to increase our sales volume. I think this would get us out of the mess.
Well, there are four main areas in which we've been rethinking our policies, Harry. Price changes and their effect on the profitability of the product is the main one. Sales mix is something we're looking at, the question of emphasizing those products which are more profitable. Advertising, of course, we have to think a lot about. And the efficiency of the sales force. I'm not suggesting we haven't got an adequate sales force, but I feel that it is not deployed to the best advantage.
It could be more effective.
It could be much more effective, I'm quite sure. And I'm looking at this, I'm thinking in terms of journey planning, reallocation of territories, motivation of salesmen, this sort of thing.
Now, what about the other side of the coin? What about reducing some of these costs?
Well, Bill spends all the money. I suggest you ask him.
When you say I spend a lot of the money, you're implying that, in fact, I control the costs in this area here. Now, this isn't strictly true.
It's all in the factory.
Yes, but if you look at this figure, a large proportion of the cost is represented by materials here. And, Jim, you, in fact, dictate quality, formulation of the product.
Not governed, Bill, not governed. I merely set minimum acceptable standards.
Precisely, and we have to formulate to those standards, and this, is, of course, incurs cost. Now, Mr. Chairman here, you are controlling the buyer who is buying this raw material, and therefore he is virtually controlling the price that we pay for the ingredients we use in formulation. Now, this only leaves me with the area of, if you like, efficient utilization of the material once I've got it.
Yeah, well, the fact remains, Bill, that all the benefits of good buying by my chaps will be wasted if your people in the factory are inefficient in using these materials.
Oh, I accept that, Harry. Or the point I'm trying to make is that the responsibility for raw material costs in total is a split responsibility. Jim dictates the formulation or composition or mix, as the case may be, because he dictates quality. You dictate the price that we pay for these raw materials. The only thing I control is the difference of losses between raw material at the beginning of the process and the material we actually sell at the end of the process.
Yes, I see what you're getting at. However, coming now onto these direct expenses, totaling £1.5 million, it seems to me, Bill, this is an awful lot of money just for factory direct expenses.
And you have £400,000 for factory indirect expenses as well, Bill.
Yes.
So you're implying that these are high?
Yes,
Are you?
certainly.
I accept that these should be investigated and looked at thoroughly, and this is what we're doing.
Oh, you are?
Oh, we are looking at this.
Good.
And one area, particularly we're looking at the moment, is maintenance. We are considering introducing planned maintenance.
Is that going to save money?
Oh, and undoubtedly it's going to save money.
Yes, well, Phil, I think we'll have to leave it now. Obviously, you're going to look into it, and you'll be reporting back to us, yes. I think we must push on. Now, Jim, I'd like to discuss this marketing and selling indirect expenses. £540,000. Now, that's an awful lot of money just for selling the stuff.
Well, that, Harry, is largely the cost of having a national sales force. And you're not going to increase your sales volume by cutting down the cost of the sales force.
No, that may be true, but we've got to take some action if we're going to get this company out of the mess it's in.
any further, gentlemen, can I draw your attention to something we appear to have missed out altogether here?
What?
Administration, 600,000. This is the biggest of the three figures, and we haven't even mentioned it.
What,
Administration, yes,
Harry.
yes. This is your area,
Shouldn't
Harry.
we have a
Oh,
look at
yes,
that?
well, surely you're not suggesting we look at this now. I mean, administration, after all, it's the, as it were, the heart of the business, the dynamic driving force.
Nevertheless,
Well,
it's costing £600,000,
Well, it is, yes.
Harry.
Well, it might be right to spend more than 600,000 on administration.
We accept that, but are you looking at this in detail?
I am looking at it. I'm having every item in that thoroughly investigated, just as you are on your side, Bill.
You will be letting us know what
yes,
you...
Yes, certainly. So, can we now get down to considering our plans for next year?
Well, I think we should look at the long-term plans
Yeah.
first, and then look at the short-term plans, and those the annual plans in relation to this.
Bill, I would normally agree, but I think that in the situation we're now in, our first priority must be to get out of the red, and then we'll have a look at long-term plans when we have more time.
Yes, I think we've got to take crash measures here, Bill, to get
Yes.
the annual situation under control, and then we'll have more time to sit down and think about long-term plans.
All right, I see your point.
Now, I think normally what we should do is to sit down and try and decide what are the limiting factors which are preventing us from earning more profits. But I think that in the situation we find ourselves in, Jim, there can be no doubt whatever that the chief limiting factor is shortage of sales.
Well, the biggest limiting factor, Harry, on the sales side is not having product Z. We've got to have this product on the market very quickly, and I hope to have it on the market next year, in fact, fully on the market next year.
Well, the national?
Yes, yes.
Oh, it's impossible, Jim.
Impossible. This is what we agreed, Bill.
No, this was never agreed.
This was agreed at a meeting we held on this very subject about 3 or 4 months ago, when we discussed our... Do you remember, Mr. Chairman, when we discussed our plans for Product Z, and it was agreed that we would test market towards the end of this year and launch nationally during next year?
Absolute nonsense.
Isn't there something in the minutes, Mr.
This was
Chairman?
no, we discussed it at a meeting, but this was never agreed by me. Couldn't have been agreed by me, Jim, for the simple reason that we haven't got this product fully out of the development stage at the moment, and until we've got it out, we can't get the machines modified, we can't get the makers of specifications, and to get all this done and have a launch national by next year.
There's nothing in the minutes, Jim.
Well,
Nothing
that's my
in the minutes at all.
recollection of the meeting.
Well, your recollection is wrong, Jim. Absolutely wrong. So,
Well, I'm very disturbed because this is a most important thing from our point of view, and I'd like to know just what we are doing about it. Have you
now,
ordered
look,
the
Jim,
machine?
look, will you
All
keep
right.
to your marketing side
All
and
right.
leave me to get...
This is
All
my
right,
marketing
all right,
This is
side.
my
all
production
right,
side.
all
You
right.
keep
Now, will
out of my
please
area.
Calm down. Now, look, we may have made mistakes in the past.
There are no mistakes, Harry. Let's get this very clear. There's been no mistakes. It's just that Jim here has got the misunderstanding
There's certainly
somewhere.
been
I don't
a
know where-
misunderstanding.
All right, well, a misunderstanding.
Well, don't
Yes,
blame me if you
yes,
don't get
yes.
sales,
Well,
if you won't give me the stuff to sell.
All right.
We'll give you the stuff
We won't cause
in due
mistakes.
course.
Let us now try and see what we shall do in the future. And we've got to take some action.
We know precisely what we're doing, Harry. We've got it all laid on, what we're doing with Product Z. I mean, I've got a chapter and verse here. We've got to finalise the process,
Yes.
firstly. Then we've got to order the equipment, we've got to install the equipment, and then we've got to produce enough for Jim to test market, and that's going to take something like 29 weeks.
29 weeks.
29 weeks.
Yeah.
Then we've got to test market, and this is going to take 26 weeks before we get an answer on the product.
26 weeks.
And after that, we've got to install the plant that we order following the test market. We've got to install we've got to modify the existing plant. We've got to test and commission the plant.
How long will that take?
And all told, that will take something like 31 weeks.
Look, how much are we going to need in total?
Well,
That's
in
what I want
total,
to
it's
know.
going to be 86 weeks.
Oh, this is incredible. 86 weeks, Bill. Look, surely we can do some of these operations together at the same time.
Well, we are doing some of these operations together at the same time if you take the overall project.
Bill, have you ever heard of a technique called network analysis?
Certainly, yes, yes.
Have you used it on this project?
Well, no, because we've used the methods that I've been using for a number of years, which I found very successful, and I see no reason to alter them, quite honestly.
You don't think it'll help you?
Well, I'm very doubtful.
Well, Bill, would you mind just having a go at it? Just have a chat to some of these network analysis boys, see whether or not it will help you to cut down the time.
Well, I'm quite happy to do a network on this, or have
Good.
a network done, if you feel that this is going to be an
Well,
advantage.
I think it would help.
I see, right? Yes, fair
Right?
enough.
Thank you, Bill.
Well, network or not, Mr. Chairman, can we have a firm agreement at least on the test market date so that we can get on with our part of the job?
I mean, I've given you that date. I said 29 weeks as from now, which brings
Which
us
is what?
Which brings us something about April, beginning of April.
Beginning.
Beginning
April
of April.
next year.
Yeah.
Beginning of April.
To avoid further misunderstandings, Mr. Chairman, can we have that minuted, please?
Certainly. April next year, test market.
Thank you.
Well, so much for product Z then. Now, Jim, what are your plans for product groups X and Y?
And my preliminary conclusions are that we can do two things immediately
Yeah.
to improve our overall position. First, by making adjustments in prices, we can improve the margins of the individual products.
Mhm.
And secondly, by advertising, we can improve the turnover.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to take prices first, the position as we see it,
Oh, yes.
on this chart, which deals only with pricing, in this first column here, we have a number of alternative prices. We have considered other alternative prices and rejected them,
I see.
and I'm only
Yes,
showing here
interesting.
those which have some relevance to the recommendations I'm
I see.
going to make.
Yeah.
In the next column, we have the turnover which we would expect to achieve at these price levels shown here. And at these prices, this column shows the gross margin. And these gross margins are based on the same costs as we saw in your previous sheet,
Ah, yes. Yep.
the latest estimate sheet.
Yes.
Now, by applying this gross margin figure to the estimated tonnages, we get a gross profit figure for each product at each price level. And the profitability will determine our recommendations. Now, in the case of X1, the optimum price is the present price, and I'm recommending no change.
Uh-huh.
In the case of X2, we find that the maximum profitability is at the £65 level, so I'm recommending an increase in price of £5 per tonne. In the case of Y1, the most profitable level is at the £70 per tonne level, which is an increase of £10 per tonne, and in the case of Y2, a price reduction to £50 per tonne, giving a profitability of £425,000.
I see. So you're recommending the price which will give you the largest
The maximum gross profit,
Yes.
yes.
Well, Jim, you know, you sound awfully positive about the effect that these price changes are going to have on sales. How can you be so sure that it will have this effect?
Well, of course, we have gathered all the information we can on the subject before we have made our estimates. We've made a very careful study of the market trends, our competitors' activities, our shares of the market, our competitors' shares in the market, and of course we have in our marketing department, Harry, a very substantial body of experience.
You have a feeling for the market.
Well, we marketing people do, I suppose, develop a sort of instinct for the likely outcome of any actions we may take.
I'd like to ask you about the advertising question. Have you looked into this?
We are looking into this, Harry. We haven't completed our detailed studies on the subject, and I'm not yet ready to make recommendations, except that I can say that we are definitely going to make recommendations that we should have an advertising appropriation.
Good, yeah.
The target we are setting ourselves, which I think we can achieve, is to increase our total sales through advertising by about 30%.
30%? 30% increase?
In that case, if you're talking about 30% for the year, this means that I've got to raise my production by about 50% by the end of the year.
Well,
We're operating at
50%
by
increase
the end of
by
the
the
year.
year. We're
yes.
wanting to be producing at about 50% above the present level.
But can
Yes,
you possibly
that is so.
do that, Bill?
Oh, we can do it, yes, but it does mean additional costs, of course. So we're going to incur additional costs on the labour side, which will have to be paid for.
What do you mean additional cost, Bill? Why do we have to pay for this? You said earlier on that if I gave you extra volume, you would reduce your costs.
Ah, yes, up to a limit. But the point is, you see, that once you get above this limit of single shift working, we've now got to go on to overtime or to two shift working or part-time shift or something, which means it's going to cost us more in labour. Well, now,
Is this more than you're going to save through the extra activity?
Well, this I don't know. This is
Well,
the
how
point.
much extra is it?
It may increase the unit cost, it may reduce the unit cost. I just don't know.
Well, you know, it's about time we did know. It strikes me that we are very deficient in having the right sort of information to help us make decisions. You know, when we were looking through these pricing alternatives, I had a sort of nasty feeling that all those profit figures that you were using were perfectly valid for last year and for last year's sales volume, but they probably don't give us the right answers when it comes to next year and next year's sales volume.
Well, I must admit, Mr. Chairman, that I did have certain reservations in using these figures and also in using gross profit as the basis on which to determine the profitability of the product. I don't think it's the right answer, but it's the only figures we've got, and I've had to use them.
Well, gentlemen, this confirms the fact, you know, that we need better management information, and I suggest that we now adjourn this meeting until such time as we get it.
I think that's sensible, Harry.
Yes. It's rather fortunate that we have already had the offer of quite an experienced management accountant who will be assigned to us for this very purpose. He's a fellow countryman of yours, Jim.
Is he? Oh, what's his name?
Jock McWhirter, an Edinburgh man. Do you know him?
Good Lord, no.
Well, as you've seen, we've looked at various kinds of management information, with everything pointing to the need for urgent action if profitability is to be restored. Though it was painfully obvious to all of us that costs are too high, no one was willing to reduce his own, and that conflict of interest over Product Z certainly showed up faults in our communications. Even when it seemed a positive decision on pricing might be reached, the available cost figures, though useful for normal accounting purposes, proved quite unreliable when it came to comparing alternative courses of action. As a meeting, I'm afraid it was generally ineffective, except to highlight the defects in our information. Let's hope that with more appropriate cost information, we shall be able to take more positive action at the next meeting. We are now about to resume the board meeting, which had to be adjourned 2 weeks ago for lack of management information. In the meantime, our newly assigned management accountant, Jock McWhirter, has been hard at work. Well, gentlemen, you remember that when we last met, we were worried that we weren't getting the right sort of management information to help us make decisions. Well, I'm glad to say that now that Jock has had a chance to see what our problems are, he's come up, I think, with some very useful suggestions. And he's produced a number of charts for us, of which I brought 2 along with me. Now, this is the first one that he calls a break-even chart. And as you see, it shows the break-even point in our sales volume when we make neither profit nor loss. Now, this chart is based on the results for this current year, so far as they can be estimated, and it shows this microscopic profit of £10,000, you remember, at the level of sales we're expecting to make. Along the bottom, we have the sales volume, and up here, the costs and sales values. The fixed costs come out as a horizontal line, and above that, he has superimposed what he calls the variable costs, giving us the total cost line there.
And what are these variable costs?
Well, I think perhaps I could come in here, because I discussed this with Jock at the time when he was building this break-even chart. Now, his view of this is that, of course, we can identify costs as being variable if they move in relation to the level of production, whereas fixed costs are those costs which tend to remain fairly static over a wide range of production fluctuations. For example, if we take materials, I think it's a good example. Here, of course, if we increase our production, naturally we use more materials, and they move in sympathy. Whereas if we increase our production, we don't alter the supervision. We still have the same number of supervisors, and the salaries we pay them don't alter. So this remains fairly stable.
But there must be an awful lot of costs, Bill, which are neither variable nor fixed, as you have described them, but which fall somewhere in between.
Oh, yes. Well, this is true, of course. For instance, you've got power. if you think of power, now power is made up of, if you like, two factors. You've got the annual maximum demand charge on the one hand, which remains fixed pretty well for the year, and then you have the unit costs, which varies depending on how much power you use. So here you've got a bit of both. Of course, if we take everything in the long term, everything tends to be variable. So we have to consider, when we're looking at a thing like this, the term that we're thinking about.
I think the important thing from the point of view of the three of us is that we must all be clear as to just what expenses Jock has treated as variable and what he's treated as fixed. Now, Jim, what do you think of this break-even chart as a management tool?
Well, the first thing that strikes me, Mr. Chairman, is that it illustrates the sort of alternatives which are available to us to improve our position by adjusting the relative positions of the three important lines on this chart: the cost line, the income line, as it were, and the sales volume line. This points out where we
can sort of
be interested in changing our policies.
Yes, I think this is true.
Also, I'm rather shocked to see this great slab of fixed costs down here. I think it's salutary experience to see them shown like that.
Yes.
I think this is the major advantage of this, is the fact that it does paint fairly clearly the cost structure of the company.
But this is accountancy textbook stuff, really, isn't it, Harry? You've got the overall picture of the company, but this doesn't tell you anything at all about individual products. What we have to know is this same sort of information on each product to know which of these are profitable in fact. And this, of course, represents the picture at the relative level of sales of each of our products as they are today. But if the relative level changes, in other words, if our sales mix changes, this becomes invalid.
Oh, yes, Jim. Well, this is only meant to show the picture for the company as a whole. And it's an illustration of the principles of using fixed and variable costs to show alternative courses of action.
Yes, I see that.
Oh, yes. This must be supplemented with more detailed information to be able to answer some of the questions that Jim is raising.
Yes.
But talking about charts, didn't you have another chart to show?
Yeah. Now, this, I think, is a very interesting chart, which is of an analytical nature. Jock has gone back over the last few years and has shown us how, if we had divided our expenses into fixed and variable, our profits have varied in relation to some of the basic elements in it. Now, as you see, it's a sort of composite chart. Up here we have cost per ton, here we have tons, and up here is the money. The bottom line is the sales volume. Now, the next line is the variable profit per ton, the variable profit being the difference between the selling price and the variable costs, if you like, the margin which we get to meet our fixed expenses and profits. But now, that's interesting. Why should that have declined so steadily? Is it due to increased costs?
No, certainly in those years the costs haven't risen to that extent per ton of output.
Well, Jim, do you know why they should have declined like that?
Well, prices haven't been altered over the last couple of years, Harry, so I can only assume it must be an unfavourable sales mix.
Well, we must look into that and check that.
Yes.
But you see, by multiplying up these figures, we get our total variable profit, which of course shows an even steeper decline than either of these two lines. Now, this is the real interesting thing. When one compares that declining trend with the fixed costs, we find that, unfortunately, these fixed costs, which were so nice and fixed for those 2 years, have suddenly taken a sharp upturn. And with this sort of pincer movement, our profits have, as we know, vanished almost...
I think
nothing.
this is interesting. You see, you notice that the fixed costs remain constant here, even though our sales are declining.
Our sales are declining.
So in other words, this is a good illustration of fixed costs.
Yeah, yes.
But this rise is when we took over. And this is due to the fact we've had to, if you like, uplift our standards to bring them in line with the concern standards now that
That's your opinion of what it
I think this is the case. This is the reason for this sudden surge. It's over 10%. And this is the main reason.
Well, we can certainly look into this once more to see what has caused that.
Yes, I think this is the point with any chart like this, that it's only really pointing the finger and showing where things are going wrong, and you've then got to go behind these figures to find out the reason.
But I think it's a very interesting example of the sort of information we can look forward to getting in the future.
But these charts, Harry, are based on this year's costs, and this isn't very helpful for the future. Next year's costs may not be the same as this year's.
Oh, that's true, Jim, but what else can you do? Except
Well,
use
of course,
this year's
there's the old standby of taking this year's costs and add 5% for contingencies.
costs. Add 5% for luck, you mean?
You might call it that.
Well, this is a most, if you like, unscientific way, I think, of approaching this problem. All you're doing is perpetuating past inefficiencies in the production field, as I see it. Now, I've discussed this with Jock, and we've come to the conclusion that the best approach to this problem is to use standard data. In other words, build our costs up brick by brick. Now, as you know, we have got standard data, physical data this is, which we've developed using work measurement and method study.
But surely, Bill, these are only hypothetical figures. You can't be sure they'll be realistic.
Yes, they're only theoretical standards, Bill, aren't they? Can we, in fact, achieve them?
Then, well, at the moment we are carrying out measurements against these figures, so we do know how efficient we are operating in relation to these standards at the moment. In other words, we measure the machine efficiencies and the machine utilizations against the standards that we've set.
And what sort of figures do you have?
Well, these are the figures that we are using. This is only for one part of the plant. This is for the extra plant. And you'll notice we've got, firstly, the standard machine hours per ton. In other words, this is the machine hours required to produce a ton of output. Now, we have, in fact, got the measurement of the number of operators we require to operate one of our machines. And we have established that 5 operatives are required. Now, if we multiply the two together, this gives us a total labour hours that we require per ton of output, assuming the plant runs all the time. In other words, we don't have any lost time. Now, of course, this is impossible. We do have lost time. Now, for instance, we have breakdowns on the machines. We have breakdowns in the process. We have waiting for materials and this sort of thing. Now, we have an analysis of this over a period of time, and this amounts to about 12%, plus or minus 2%, which gives us a figure of an hour per ton, in effect. So adding the whole lot together, 8.33 and 1 hour, we get 9.33 as the total labour hours per ton of output.
I see, Bill. Well, do your managers accept these as a measurement of efficiency?
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, we are using this data, of course, as I say, to measure the efficiency at the moment in physical terms.
I see. Well, this seems very nice as far as the figures go, but how do you link those up with costs?
Well, all we do is to take the labour hours per ton and apply the labour rate per hour.
I see.
And this gives us a total labour cost per ton.
Standard wages cost.
Yes. Now, we can do this not only for the extra plant, but for the Wi-Fi plant. We can do it for other areas and for other elements of cost.
Can you show us an example, Bill? Have you got any figures for next year?
Yes, I've got the figures that we produced, Jock and myself, and these are broken down into 2 sets. Firstly, we've got the standard costs for materials here, and then I've got another set of figures showing the processing costs. So if I could just deal with materials to start with. Now, this is only for one product. This is for product X1. And you see we have, firstly, the ingredients going into the mix.
Yes.
We've got A, B, and C, and we have 0.2 tons, 0.3 tons, and 0.5 tons to give the total mix of 1 ton. Now, this formula has been derived using an operation research technique called linear programming. Now, this, in fact, minimizes the mix costs whilst maintaining the minimum quality standards that has been laid down in Jim's specification. Now, if we take the costs now per ton, which I've got from your buyer for next year, we arrive at the costs of each ingredient going into the mix. In other words, for A, we have 8.46 pounds, and eventually we get the total cost of the mix of 21.46. Of course, we can't, in fact, produce at that level because we do get a loss in process. And the amount of material we put in at the beginning of the process is not quite the same as we get out at the end, because we do lose a certain amount in the process itself, so that we have to make an allowance for this. And the allowance we put in is 2.5%.
I thought our process loss was quite a bit more than 2.5%, Bill.
Well, this year it has been running higher than that. The reason we found was that the handling methods were not particularly good, and we're getting losses due to this fact. Now we're correcting this situation. We are spending some money to get the handling methods right, and this will reduce the process loss down to this level.
You know, Jim, we shall have to watch this.
Yes, this is the sort of thing that worries me about standards.
Well, we've got to start somewhere. We believe this is a realistic figure, and we can achieve this 2.5% over the year. We may not achieve it at the beginning of the year, but nevertheless, for the year itself, as a whole, we shall get down to 2.5%.
Well, thank you. Now, can we see the other chart?
Yes, certainly. These are, as you see, purely the process costs. In other words, the conversion from raw materials into the finished product costs, relating to the Exeter plant.
Yes.
Now, I don't think I need to go through, obviously, the build-up of these hours, because we've already seen those. You remember those rough figures I showed you?
Yes.
For X1. Well,
Yep.
this is basically the same information. We've come to this 9.33 total hours here. And all we've done now is to extend the hours by the wage rate, labour rate of £0.45 per hour, which gives a total cost of £4.2 per tonne of product.
Yes.
Now, we've done a similar sort of exercise on packing labour, and also here we've got supplies brought in, the small supplies that we use. Power, again, instead of using hours, we've used kilowatt hours here, and we've measured the number of kilowatt hours per tonne of product, and the rate again to give us a cost of power, and maintenance. Well, now, I think I should just make the point on maintenance that this is not the total maintenance costs. We have split maintenance into its variable and fixed elements. Now, in here, we've only got the variable element of maintenance. We've taken out the fixed part of it.
Well, now, what I'd like to know is, can the figures which are shown on these two charts be used by Jim for his marketing decisions?
Oh, certainly, yes. I mean, that's the whole object of the exercise, is to provide information in this form so that Jim can use it.
I see.
Jim, you would take it up there.
Yeah. Are you happy at using these figures?
Well, as the marketing director, obviously I'm quite happy to get my costs fixed and to know that if there is any discrepancy, Bill is held responsible for it and not me. On the other hand, as a director of the company, I'm a little bit concerned about the effect on our profitability if I base my prices on these costs and then Bill fails to achieve them.
Yes, but I think, even as a director of the company, you would accept the fact that I should be made responsible for the costs incurred on the production side and accountable for those costs.
Oh, yes.
And, if there are any variances, the variances should come to me. This leaves you free.
This is what you call responsibility accounting.
Precisely, precisely.
Yes. Now, Jim, I'd like to turn to you for a moment. I gather from Jock that all those decisions which we took when we last met about your sales pricing policy are all a lot of nonsense, and you now want to change all the recommendations.
Well, I would hardly say that, Harry. After all, I did express reservations at the time on the validity of the information which we had available. It was valid only at one level of sales volume, as we agreed, and gave no indication of the costs at other sales levels. And this was why I was unable to complete my advertising proposals at the time.
So you want us to go through them again?
Yes, I have some recommendations here on price. Well, these are the pricing alternatives. The figures in blue are the new information based on variable costs, shown alongside the old information which was based on gross margin. Now, in the case of X1, our figures indicated again that there is nothing to be gained by changing the price, so I don't think we need to go any further into that one.
No.
In the case of X2, we find that our most profitable alternative in terms of variable profit is no longer a price increase of £5, but is now in fact to leave the price as it stands.
I see.
Now, this raises another question, because if we don't change the price, we're left with this margin of £6 at gross level, £10 at variable level, which we agreed at a very early stage was completely inadequate.
Much
we now find we can do nothing to improve this in terms of price, so our only remedy is to look again at our costs. We'll have to get this improvement by cost reduction.
So it's over to you, Bill.
Yes, I suppose it is really, but the problem here is I can't see any saving on processing costs. So it looks, Jim, as though we'll have to look at it from the material costs. Are you prepared to reconsider your quality standards?
Well, we would have to talk about that, Bill. I rather doubt if this product will stand any reduction in quality, but we can have a look at it.
I think there's another area, of course, and that is packaging. I think it would be well worthwhile applying value analysis to packaging to see if we can make some savings there.
Oh, I see. You think there's a potential, do you, for saving? And value analysis was highlighted.
I think this is true. Yes, I think we could certainly make some saving there.
You haven't
Please,
used it
mind
here. You haven't used it here before.
No, we haven't used it in this company before. No.
Oh, well, this is a good place to start, I should think.
Oh yes, I'm sure it is.
Good.
Well, if we can come back to the chart now, going on to Y1, the position on Y1 is very much the same as it was in X2, in that where we were formerly recommending a price increase, in this case of £10 per tonne, we now find that the most profitable thing to do with this product is leave the price as it is. Now going on to Y2, this is a little bit more contentious perhaps. We've had to add an extra line to this one to really get the maximum benefit. We find that with a cost reduction of £25 per tonne, we should be able to push our sales up to 60,000 tonnes and achieve a total variable profit of £900,000 on this product. This is based on the fact that this is a reduction in price of very nearly 50%. It's a product which has no national competition. It's a product which is very attractively packaged, and we can put quite a bit of special sales effort behind this.
Yes, but Jim, I must point out that we would get exactly the same benefit if you only reduced to £40 per tonne and we only had to sell 45,000.
Well, at this level of 60,000, this gives us a good deal of strength against our competitors such as they are, and is a much stronger position than we would be in at the 45,000 level, which would still be a reasonably vulnerable situation.
So what you're saying, Jim, that if you projected this forward for 2 to 3 years, the decision would be fairly clear-cut in favour of this lower figure, the 35.
Yes, it gives us a much better starting off point for following years.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jim. I hope that's the last time we shall have to consider these pricing alternatives.
Yes, I hope so.
But the fact that we've had to make changes, I think it certainly demonstrates the importance of getting the right sort of information for decision making.
Yes, it does. Shall we carry on now with the advertising?
Yes, please.
Of the proposals?
Yes.
On this card we have only X products, you'll notice. Now the reason for that is that I'm making no proposals for an appropriation for any of the Y products. In the present competitive environment of the Y products, advertising expenditure would not recover itself.
I see.
So I don't think the time is right for introducing it. Now on the chart, let's look at this column first, variable profit less advertising. Now this is in effect the net contribution to our profits which will be made by the product in terms of variable profit, but after deducting from it the advertising appropriation required to achieve that level of sales.
Yes, I see.
In other words, this column represents the variable margin times the sales tonnage, less the appropriate advertising figure.
Yes, I see.
Now, coming to X1 specifically, we've considered 3 different levels of advertising expenditure and their effect on sales. And as a result of these calculations, the most profitable level of advertising appropriation is 240,000, bringing in 80,000 tonnes of sales, and a variable profit less advertising of 1,360,000.
Yes.
Now, that is only 10,000 more than the next level, so that by spending 450,000 we could achieve sales of 90,000 tonnes and a variable profit which is only 10,000 less than the previous level, and I think this is worth doing in order to push up our tonnage.
I don't go along with that at all.
Well, can we leave that for the moment, Harry, and we'll come back to it when I finish my full proposals.
All right, well, we certainly will come back to it.
Well, let's go on to X2 in the meantime. Again, we have considered 2 different levels of advertising here, 10,000 appropriation and an 80,000, and the net result is that the 80,000 brings in a net contribution of 210,000 with a sales tonnage of 29,000, and this again is my recommendation.
Now, just a minute. Bill, do you notice this? 90 plus 29, that's 119,000. Isn't that well in excess of your limit for single shift working?
Oh yes, it is. I think that our limit is about 100,000.
Yeah.
So we're talking about another 20% increase, and this, of course, is going to increase the costs that we've got to charge to Jim.
By how much?
Well, we've got some figures here showing the various alternatives that are open to us, depending on the volume that we want. So perhaps we could just have a look at these.
Can we look at them now?
Certainly.
Good.
Now, if you'll notice that we've got 4 alternatives. If we take the first one, is overtime on Sundays.
Yes.
Now, these are all shown as additional costs over and above the cost that he would normally be charged for the units of production
Additional cost.
he's passed over. So they're all additional to the unit cost. So we've got Sunday working, which, of course, as you see, is very much more expensive than any other alternative. The next one, we have overtime on weekdays and on Saturdays. And this is the line coming up here.
Yes.
The next alternative we could go on to is part-time shift working, which, of course, runs up this line. But, of course, there's a limit. At some stage, we can go on to a combination of part-time shift in the evenings and working on Saturdays, which, of course, comes up here. And when we get to this level, of course, we'd have to go on to double shift working.
That's the only alternative.
That's the only alternative.
Yes.
So, what we could do is to come up here, and at this point, change to part-time
Yes.
shift. And then at this point, here, we'd have to go on to...
I see. Yes. Now, what does this mean for Jim?
Well, now, as far as Jim's concerned, if in fact we wanted 119,000, we're talking in terms of another £40,000 of additional costs.
On
Well,
top
now,
of that, 10,000.
Precisely. So, in other words, he's not talking about 10,000 to get this additional volume, but 50,000.
So that puts it doubly out of court, Jim.
Yes, I agree in the circumstances. I know that Bill said earlier on that 100,000 was the limit for this, but I know you production chaps, and I thought you might have a bit up your sleeve, so I took a chance on it. However, as the situation has worked out, I also did some calculations on the assumption that I would be restricted to 100,000. On this basis, obviously, it doesn't make any sense to go beyond the 80,000 for X1, and this leaves a possible 20,000 for X2. Now, my view is that I can sell more than 20,000, so if this is the case, there appears to be a reasonable case for a price increase on X2 together with an advertising appropriation. So if we can look at this bottom line here, what I'm now suggesting is that we raise the price by £5 per tonne to restrict demand slightly, advertise at a level of £100,000, and this should bring us in very nearly as much, £200,000, as I had expected to get from my earlier proposal.
I see.
So my proposal now is 80,000 and 20,000 with advertising appropriations of 240,000 and 100,000, and if by any chance production does fail to meet the 100,000 mark for any reason, I suggest it's X2 we reduce on and not X1.
Yes, I see. So summing up, Jim, it's 80,000.
80,000 on X, 20,000 on X2.
Yeah.
On Y1 we were suggesting 30,000 and on Y2 60,000.
Yeah. There are 1 or 2 points, Jim, I'd like to raise. Have you taken competitors' advertising into account?
Well, we have estimated our competitors' reaction to our activities, and we've taken this into account in assessing our possible sales in future.
I see. Finally, I see no mention of Product Z. I'd hoped that with the fresh look Bill was giving it, we'd have got some improvements here.
Well, Bill says that although some change in plan could arise as a result of doing the network, this isn't likely to bring the national launch forward into this year.
Well, what happened about network analysis, Bill? Did you get any reductions?
No, I'm afraid we're unable to bring back the time period.
Oh, well, what did happen then?
Well, it increased slightly.
Oh, so your estimating was wrong then?
Well, yes, fractionally, I suppose. Yes, it was. Fractionally.
I wonder how fractionally. Anyway, you'd use this approach again?
I think the answer to that is yes. Yes, I think as an additional discipline, it has certain advantages.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I think we've gone about as far as we can this afternoon, and I suggest that we pass these decisions to Jock, and when he's prepared the budgets, which we hope will show us the profit that we're about to make, then we'll have another meeting to discuss them. All right?
By way of a postscript, you may like to know that by replanning, using networks, and taking a minimum of calculated risks, Bill was eventually able to cut down the time needed on Product Z to 74 weeks. Well, I hope you will agree that that was altogether a more positive action. I think we've got a better grip on the process of weighing up alternatives and taking policy decisions. We have accepted the idea of using standards as a basis for estimates, and we have a better grasp of the way that costs can vary in relation to volume. Altogether, this means that we are now in a position to really take decisions aimed at maximizing profits, as illustrated by Jim when he was working out for products X the varying effects of advertising, price changes, and sales mix. Well, it's now up to Jock McWhirter to convert these decisions into financial terms, ready for our next meeting. A month has passed since we last met. Jock started with the decisions which we reached then, and after many further discussions, has expressed our agreed objectives in financial terms and prepared what he calls an operating budget covering all sides of the business. We are now about to meet to approve this.
Well, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Harry.
Well, I'm glad to say that Jock has now done his stuff and prepared the budgets for us to have a look at. Jock asked me to make clear that what he's done here is to prepare budgets for our use. He pointed out, you see, that if he'd been preparing these documents for submission to our lords and masters at head office, they might have been drawn up in a different basis. For example, to show gross profit, say, rather than variable profit. But these are for our use as managers of this company, and the purpose of the meeting today is to go through them and see whether we agree them. Now, Jim, I think that you will recognize most of this top half of the budget.
Sales volume are the figures we agreed at the meeting.
Yes.
Net sales value, that appears to tie up with our price decisions.
Yes.
These are not mine. That's
No,
not
but
mine.
those were the costs we looked at, as you'll see later.
Yes. Advertising and promotions, 240 on X1, 100 on X2, that's correct.
And those were the profit figures which you showed us on your
Yes.
pricing and
Yes,
advertising
these are the same.
alternative charts. And
Yes.
you notice they add up to the fairly generous figure of £3 million,
Yes.
which would be very nice were it not for the subsequent deduction of
These
all these
fixed
fixed
expenses.
expenses. Now, Bill, I think we ought to look at these costs which Jim has used in
Yes.
evaluating his alternatives, and Jock has prepared for us a separate chart on which all the figures per ton are set out. Now, how do these figures compare with this year's costs? That's what I'd like to know.
Well, generally speaking, I would say that
I
the
don't think you
material...
want to go into sort of generally speaking. I'd like to know fairly specifically how they compare.
Oh, well, if you want to be
let's take
specific
materials
about this,
to start
I've
with.
got some figures here which will give the information. Materials, as I say, are down on this year by
That's useful.
about £1.8 per tonne. This is on average over the whole of the products. But unfortunately, this reduction is offset by increases elsewhere.
I
Sure.
thought that material prices had, if anything, risen this year,
Oh, no.
Bill.
No,
Does
no.
this mean that we've cut down on quality?
Oh no, the quality, no, we're formulating to the same quality that we always have done. So you don't need to be worried on that score.
Well, we've had a few complaints recently, you know.
Ah, yes, but the complaints you get, Jim, are negligible
All right,
compared
all
to the
right.
volume.
Yeah, all right.
we
Well,
produce.
let's go on now to the other expenses. How do they compare?
Well, labour is up by about £1 a tonne overall. This is due to a number of factors, one of which, of course, is this job evaluation. We have applied job evaluation. We now have these new rates coming along, job evaluated rates.
Up a pound a tonne.
But this is not, no, I'm not saying that job evaluation has caused all this rise, but this is one of the factors. We have been uncompetitive in the local labour market, especially for skilled labour, and we just had to do something. There were
I see.
We're just completely out of line.
What about the other costs?
Well, power, I'm pleased to say, is down fractionally, and also is maintenance. We've brought
Down
maintenance
as well?
down as well. Of course,
Oh, good.
as you know, we have introduced planned maintenance,
Yes,
so this
yes,
was expected to
yes.
some extent.
Well, you seem to have this nicely under control, Bill, and I think we'd better come back now to the other chart, our budget again, and start looking at these fixed expenses. Factory direct expenses, 860,000. By far and away the largest item in that. Ancillary labour and supervision,
Yes.
40,000. Now, would you like to say something about that, Bill?
Well, mainly, of course, it's the labour responsible for receiving raw materials into the factory, for dispatch of finished goods, for cleaning around the factory, for
Yes.
trucking in the factory.
Yes.
This sort of service labour, and of course all the supervision on the shop floor.
I see. So none of it could be considered to be variable.
No. You see, I mean, if you just take, for example, the receipt of raw materials,
Yes.
these tend to peak from time to time.
Yes,
So you've got to
yes.
have a staff available to be able to cope with these peaks.
I see.
You can't once you get into a trough, either fire them or put
No,
them. Or something.
sure.
You can do nothing with them.
Yeah.
So you can treat them as fixed.
Yes, I see. Now, 180,000 on repairs, 240 on depreciation. These are high figures too. Isn't there any hope of reducing these to any extent?
Oh no, as we say, Harry, they're fixed. No, seriously, this is true of depreciation. I think we can say depreciation is for this year is thoroughly fixed.
Yes, yes. Sure.
But on repairs, as I mentioned earlier, we have introduced planned maintenance.
Yes.
And the effect of this has been to bring some of this scheduled maintenance down.
Well, that now leaves us with the figure of just over £2 million, from which we have to start deducting indirect expenses, of which I notice, Bill, the first one is factory indirects, 500,000. Now, surely this is quite a bit up, isn't it, on this year's cost?
Oh yes, it's about 100,000 up on this year's
100,000?
terms. Yes,
That's a lot of money.
But you know the reason for this. We had a discussion about this. Must be about a month ago now.
What's that?
When we were discussing research and development costs.
Oh, yes.
Sure, we agreed at that time that we would have to increase our development
Yes,
side quite substantially if we were going to really get this company off the ground.
Bill, I think it would be helpful if we had a look at that factory plan which you showed us when we last met.
Yes. You mean this is the one you mean?
That's the one, yes.
Yes.
Now, which are the indirect expenses on this?
Well, these are all the areas in red here. The laboratory, my own office, development, all this administrative side, wages, accounts and planning, personnel services and canteen, all this area.
I see you have quite a nice large office there. This is in addition to your office here.
Oh yes, so of course I need an office down at the factory, of course, because I spend quite a bit of time down there.
Yeah, well, there's also quite a nice large conference room, which isn't presumably used to a great extent. Couldn't you use that for your own office when you're there?
Yes, well, I certainly
It'd
can do
be
that.
much nearer to the heart of operations.
Well, yes, I can certainly use that, but what's the point? I mean, it's not going to save anything, is it?
Well, not immediately, but I mean, we could certainly bring it into our long-term plans, the use of that room.
Right, well, when we have something to use that room for, then I'll vacate it, but I don't see any point in vacating it now.
All right, well, now, have you got a detailed schedule of all your indirect expenses, Bill?
I have, yes. For each of these departments, laboratory,
Yes.
the administrative, canteen, personnel service, I've gone through in some detail with each of the managers, and we have built up his own personal budget.
Good.
So that, in fact, the total figure you got down here is only an accumulation of these individual budgets.
I see. Well, can we come back to the budget now? Can you do that?
Yes.
Thank you. 620,000 for marketing and selling expenses.
But just a minute, Mr. Chairman, we're skipping your function, administration, which is by no means a small figure, 720,000.
Surely this is a substantial increase on this year, Harry.
About 120,000 up, to be precise. But as I've explained before, I regard administration as being the heart of the enterprise. However, it is a large figure, and I think one of the reasons why it's up so much is it's all these people that we've had to pay a full year's salary for next year, for which I've had to budget. You know, the extra buyers which we've engaged, the planners,
You mean you've had to recruit Harry?
Well, we've engaged, I reported to you at meetings. And, of course, the nucleus of a computer department.
Computer department?
Does this mean we're going in for a computer, Harry?
Not necessarily. We haven't made the final decision, but I have included in the budget provision for the preliminary expenses.
How much is in for the computer in total?
Some 60,000.
And what is this going to save?
It isn't so much what we're going to save, Bill. I mean, we hope to save, but the primary consideration for getting it is the extra profits and growth which we hope to get out of getting better management information.
We've had that one before, haven't we?
No, well, it is. This is the real benefit which we hope to get.
Well, I hope you're right, Harry.
Does that account for the whole increase?
No, clerical costs have, I'm afraid, risen as well, but I'm hoping to do something about that pretty soon. I think, Bill, you probably know about activity sampling.
Oh, yes, I have used this on the shop floor.
Well, I think we may get some results there in reducing our clerical costs. And, of course, you remember that when we took over this company, the two of you weren't very pleased with your offices.
Well, they were pretty scruffy, weren't they?
Dreadful.
Well,
yes.
so you thought. However, this includes a reasonable provision for putting them right. Righto, well, can we now come back to marketing and selling expenses, Jim? 620,000, Jim. Now, if we're going to spend all this money on advertising, can't we cut our selling expenses at least?
Gets more like the Monopolies Commission here every day. No, Harry, advertising and selling are complementary. Advertising is directed at the consumer and serves to pull the products out of the shops, but we need salesmen to push them into the shops. In addition, of course, you can't get any point-of-sale display without direct college. You can't mount a decent promotion without salesmen in the shop. In fact, altogether, advertising is just money down the drain without a sales force.
Well, how do your costs compare with the current year?
Well, they're up slightly.
How slightly?
About £80,000.
80,000? What on earth is that on?
Well, the biggest part of it, of course, is the market research which we want to engage in. This is absolutely vital at this stage of our development.
Can't we possibly reduce these?
Not without crippling our efforts to increase sales, Harry.
I see. Anything else?
Well, there's a little bit extra for travelling. You know how hotel bills and railway tickets and so on keep going up.
Yeah.
And, of course, we're bringing the sales force up to its full strength. I think that's about all. Oh, of course, there's the 5 trainee area managers we're taking on.
5 trainees? What are these for?
Well, we're planning for the future, Harry.
Yeah, but I mean, do we really need all that expense? Is it justified?
Well, trainees don't cost much.
Oh, well. Now, the net effect of all this is that by the time we've deducted all our fixed expenses, we're left with a trading profit of 300,000.
Yes, about, 5%?
Yeah,
On capital employed, I should say.
And that's before tax. Not a very satisfactory return.
No, but it's better than hovering around the break-even point.
Well, I think before we attempt to agree the budget, we might as well have a look at the profit chart which Jock prepared for us, which he's now updated by putting on these later figures.
Yes. At this level of profit, Harry, of course, we're still very vulnerable, aren't we? It won't take much to erode this completely and put us in a lost situation.
No, that's true.
Yes, there's less than 10% margin of safety here, isn't there?
Margin of safety? What do you mean, Jim?
Well, the whole of our profit comes from the last 10% of our sales.
And there's another point that strikes me, that if, by any mischance, we run into another economic blitz and our sales really drop, say back to the current level, we're going to be that much more in the red.
Yes.
See, we've got a higher break-even point.
Well, it appears that volume is of prime importance in this situation, and we must rely on Jim to achieve his sales targets.
Yes, certainly.
The question arises, of course, if he doesn't, what do we do?
Oh, I can tell you what we do. What we've got to do is to make pretty sure that we lower our break-even point again. And the way that we could do that most easily is by cutting advertising.
And also immediately reduce our sales to below the new break-even point. And in addition, you'll be looking for a new marketing director.
I hope not.
Well, I hope the situation never arises, Mr. Chairman.
Any comments on this chart, Bill?
Well, yes, just one or two. I think I can understand fairly clearly the rise here in the sales level.
Which we planned, yes.
Which we planned. And also this increase here in fixed costs, where this is mainly bringing ourselves up to concern standards. I think we all agree there. And also, of course, the variable profit, which we expected. But the one thing that staggers me is this dramatic fall in the variable profit per tonne from £19 to £17.5. This I don't understand at all. You see, we've had a gradual decline in variable profit from 21, 20, 19 over the years, and suddenly...
I think I can tell you about this. This must be the impact of the new policy which we have established for Y2, whereby we've had a very substantial price reduction and therefore a very substantial cut in the variable margin, and at the same time a very substantial increase in the tonnage. So it carries a very much bigger weight in the average with a much lower margin, and this must have affected the average margin.
Yes.
Yes, earlier on, of course, it was just a small mixture change.
Yes.
Well, I think this is quite an interesting chart, because I must point out, Bill, that this increase is not just bringing it up to concerned standards.
No,
your research and development
and your computer.
Jim's extra trainees and my computer.
Yes, I suppose this is true. But there is quite a large slice in there.
Yes,
For these other factors.
Well, Jim, would you mind going back to the budget?
Yes, let's take these away.
Now, I think we're ready to agree this, but before we do, I notice that it only seems to relate to sales and costs, with no reference, Bill, to any of your own production plans.
In a sense it does, of course, because you'll notice here that Jock's put the capacity required. This is the production capacity requirements. Yes. And you'll notice that the extra plant will be operating at about 93% of capacity.
I see. This is an indication of your production, in other words.
Yeah.
But if you're only using 93% of your Exeter plant, Bill, why am I being restricted to 100,000 tonnes of ex-product?
Well, of course, we can never get 100%, Jim. We must take...
Why not?
Well, we've got to take plant out for overhauls. You can't work a piece of machinery all the time.
Do you mean 100% is a theoretical capacity?
Oh, yes.
And is this the best you can do, then?
Yes. This is, 93% is a realistic level, I think.
This is the best we can do?
Oh, yes. We couldn't get anything better than that.
Right, now, do we agree this is our budget?
I think so, Mr. Chairman, yes.
As far as I'm concerned, yes.
Yes, good.
There's just one question I'd like to ask, Mr. Chairman. What effect does all this have on our financial position?
Now, Jock has prepared another set of budgets dealing with our financial position, showing working capital or capital expenditure and liabilities and so on. But I think that there really won't be time today to consider these. I think we better adjourn this meeting now and have a look at these at another occasion. You agree?
Yes.
Right, well. Thank you. Thank you, Bethel.
I think I should remind you that a lot of hard work had gone on behind the scenes before the figures we've just looked at were included in the budget. Much give and take occurring at this stage. This perhaps explains the comparatively easy way in which the budget figures were agreed, without any referring back for second thoughts. But I hope this won't cause you to overlook the powerful control tool which a budget provides. It's so much more effective to approve policy changes and expense limits beforehand, rather than relying entirely on subsequent post-mortems as to why costs and profits have got out of line. Incidentally, it's interesting to note that despite our avowed intention to concentrate on the short term, we soon found ourselves involved in long-term strategies, computer development, research, sales force policies, and so on. I think this demonstrates the importance, the vital importance, of drawing up long-term plans for, say, 5 years ahead at the earliest possible opportunity. It is now 3 months since our new policies for the year ahead were agreed and our objectives expressed in the form of an operating budget. Join us for the last time as we review the first quarter's results.
All right, Jock. Thank you very much. I'll let him know as soon as he arrives.
Good morning, Jim.
Morning, Harry.
Harry, that was Jock on the telephone.
Oh, yes.
Those figures he promised you, they're on the way up.
Oh, good. Yes, he rang me last night to say that we could have the results for the first quarter at this meeting. And he mentioned that he's also sending some figures to head office, the usual quarterly results. So I said, well, could we have a look at the key figures so we can be forewarned against any post-mortems that may come along?
That's wise.
Yes. Well, now, while we're waiting, Jim, how have you done against budget, do you think, on your sales?
Well, total sales for the quarter are ahead of target, Harry. We're a little bit up on one product, a little bit down on others, but in general, we're ahead.
Good. And what about you, Bill? Have you cut a lot of costs?
Well, it certainly costs are down compared with budget.
Good.
And I'm very happy with the situation.
Good.
What about admin, Harry?
Well, let me put it this way. I think they're coming out rather less than I thought they might do. Oh, hello, Sandra. Are these from Mr. McMurter? Yes, good. Thank you very much.
Who was that, Harry?
Oh, she's my new personal assistant.
How long's she been with you?
Oh, just about a week. Why, she's not very expensive.
I wasn't thinking of the expense, Harry.
Let's keep our minds on these figures. Let's see what we've got from Jock. Latest estimate of results. Quarters operating. Ah, and here we are, the key figures which have gone to head office. Now let's have a look at these. Sales, 2,500 budget. These are in thousands of pounds. Actual, 2,105. Jim, this is way down on budget. I thought you said we'd done better than budget.
Surely there must be a mistake somewhere, Harry.
Just a minute. Variable profit, down. Advertising, down. Fixed expenses, down. And trading profit, instead of a budgeted figure of 75,000, we're coming out at a trading loss.
A loss?
A loss.
Well, that's worse than last year.
I have an operating statement of my own, Harry, and there's no suggestion on it that we're running into any sort of trouble.
Well, let's have a look at it, Jim.
Here it is. Well, there's one thing very clear straight away, Harry. My budget figure is different from yours.
You've got a figure of 2,060.
This is based on my phased sales budget.
I know what they've taken, Jim, here. And these are the figures that Jim's got. You just got a straight quarter of the total annual budget.
So you're not suggesting I've got the wrong figures here? These can't be wrong. I mean, these are the figures that have gone to head office.
Ah, but they're all right for head office consolidation, no doubt, Harry. But they're quite unsatisfactory for our control purposes here. Didn't you get a copy of this phased sales budget?
Phased sales budget? Yes, I think I did. Now, I wonder what I've done with it. Well, let's have a look.
Well, you will see from this that my anticipated sales start at their lowest point in the first quarter and reach their climax on the fourth quarter. They're not rising quite steadily, but there's a seasonal impact on the second quarter. But in general, we don't expect to sell anything like a full quarter of our total year in the first quarter.
First quarter. Yes, I see. Well, now, Jim, can we have a look at your operating statement?
Well, before we do that, I've got another chart here which Jock produced for me, which I think may throw some further light on this. This is a Z chart, and it enables us to plot against the cumulative budgeted figure the actual cumulative figures for the year as they arise. And you will see from this that our actual line is above the budgeted line. This is what I was saying when I said we're ahead of target.
I see. And how do you calculate the moving annual total, Jim?
Well, this is an average of the last 12 months ending on the date of the plot. In other words, as we go from month to month and get a fresh month's figures, we drop off the oldest month, the equivalent month of the previous year, and add in the latest figures to give us a full 12 months total again. And this eliminates seasonal aspects and gives us a line which indicates the trend of our sales.
Thank you, Jim. Can we now go through your operating statement and see how your sales compare with the phased budget?
Yes, well, looking first of all at the total figures, on sales, you'll see we are up, as we said. On terms of profit, we are a bit down on profit. I'll come back to that in a moment. If we can just look at the tonnage figures first. On sales, X1 we're down 4,000 tonnes, on X2 we're up 6,000 tonnes, Y1 we're on target, and Y2 we're 3,000 tonnes down. Now, coming on to the profit again, these profit figures are based on standard production costs. In other words, these are the figures which Bill agreed would be his transfer price to me.
Yeah.
So any production variances have been eliminated before this reaches me.
Yeah.
Now, in being slightly above sales, we would expect to have made a little bit more profit. And this analysis figure down here, sales turnover, we have a positive variance of £15,000 due to exceeding our sales level. But unfortunately, our sales mix had an adverse variance with the result that we lost 50,000 on sales mix, the net loss being 35,000 over the quarter.
Well, from these figures, Jim, you appear to have concentrated on volume at the expense of profitability.
I presume you're referring to the shortfall of 4,000 tonnes on X1 and...
Yes, this is the area. This mix, the product mix, that seems to be the problem.
Well, of course, we had some fairly heavy competition against X1, but this isn't the main reason. The main reason is that we didn't get from production the new pack required for our X1 promotion. And the result was we had to switch in an X2 promotion, which didn't require a new pack, at very short notice.
I seem to remember this, Jim.
So you let him down, Bill?
No, I didn't let him down. It was your buyer. He didn't get the promotional packs through in time. There was some problem on the artwork. I can't remember the full details.
We have a better understanding with our suppliers now.
Well, even so, Harry, you were pressing me to use networks on the production side. I think there's a good case here where networks may well be the answer.
You're probably right. Well, now, can we get on and have a look at the production aspects? Bill, I'd like to know how this phasing affects your production planning. Do you aim to produce at the same constant level all the year, or do you try to copy Jim's phasing?
Well, in principle, of course, what we're aiming to do is to try and hold production at a fairly stable level. We don't want to fluctuate violently if we can avoid it.
Yes.
So that, in principle, this is what we try to do.
This, surely, if you did do this too much, this would lead to excessive stock keeping, wouldn't it?
Well, it would, of course. We've got to sort of strike a balance here between, if you like, violent fluctuations in production and very high or very low stock levels. It's a matter of compromise.
Yeah. I take it you've studied the whole position fairly thoroughly, have you?
Oh, we have regular meetings between production and marketing, Harry, and examine the forward months very carefully.
I see. Well, I think then now it's time we started on this vital question of costs. And I think, Bill, we'd better start with your costs.
Oh, the production costs?
Yes. Now, you said that you'd saved a substantial sum. Can you quantify this?
Oh, yes. I think costs are down by about 3% on our standards.
Good. Well, can we have some of the details?
Is there really time to go into this?
Oh, yes, certainly.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I see. The costs that we've got are set out here, Harry, on this statement. As you see, it's broken down into two areas. We've got at the top here the material costs, and below the variable factory expenses.
I see. And you've got your actual here and the allowed. Now, what are these allowed costs, Bill?
Well, the allowed costs are the costs we should have incurred for the volume of production we've actually produced.
Should have incurred?
Yes. These are based on the standard figures.
Yes.
And the standard costs that we transfer our production to Jim at, you see. And so what we're doing is to compare the actual costs with the allowed costs and throw out the difference, which is here in black where it is a gain, and as you say in red where it's a loss.
Now, I notice that the biggest gain is on price of materials.
Yes, we have made a very substantial gain here.
That's presumably good buying by my chaps.
Whether it's good buying or a lucky strike, I honestly wouldn't know.
I see you've made a gain on formulation, Bill.
Yes, using the linear programming technique, we have been able to substitute now a cheaper raw material into the mix, and this has brought the cost down, as you see.
Has this had any harmful effects on the quality of the product?
Oh no, not on quality. No, the quality is exactly the same as it was before. In fact, I think, as you know, the quality is too high, and we should look at this.
Let's carry on, Bill. Now, let's have a look at these losses. Now, what's this loss on materials here?
The £25,000, yes.
Yeah.
Well, if you recall, when we were discussing the standards, Harry, we put in for process loss. This is the loss that we get when we convert raw materials into finished products. A 2.5% figure.
Yes.
Now, I did say at that time that we were unlikely to achieve this in the first part of the year, but over the year, this is the level we would get down to. And this is, in fact, proving my point. We haven't got down to the 2.5% level.
I always thought you were a bit over-optimistic.
No, I'm quite convinced we shall achieve this 2.5% over the year, Harry.
Oh, well, we'll be keeping an eye on that one. Now, what about your other production expenses?
Well, the figure here, which is probably the highest one, of £14.1 thousand, this is due to two factors. Firstly, formulation. Because we reformulated, we had to alter the speed of our plant throughput. And the other thing is that we have been operating at a slightly lower efficiency than we anticipated. So it's really two factors.
I see. Well, I want to go into these other losses now. We'll do that at some other time. Bill, the point that really strikes me is that out of the total savings of 48,000, you haven't contributed very much, have you? Most of that saving is due to good buying, in fact, more than the total.
Well, I suppose you might put it that way, Mr. Chairman, but the important thing regarding these figures is the fact that now we know precisely where our losses and gains are arising, and therefore we can take the appropriate action.
Yes, I see.
And I think this is the important thing, you know. And it's a little early, I think, to be able to say how effective this is going to be.
Yeah. And what about your fixed expenses?
I think you'll find that Jock has put these on the summary of results statement. I think you got this, haven't you?
I see. Well, we'll have a look at that in a moment. Well, before we leave this, I think I must say that I think it's extremely helpful that we are now getting information which shows not only the causes of variances from budget, but also the responsibilities. And I understand what is meant by responsibility accounting now. Now, Jim, I think we ought to have a look at your marketing and selling expenses, and I presume you've got a similar statement, have you, showing how your costs compare with allowed costs?
Well, not quite in that form, Harry. After all, most of my costs are of a fixed nature, and all I really need, I think, is a simple comparison against our budget.
Yes. I think we better have a look at it right away. Shall we get up this results for the first quarter? Here we are.
These figures, the tons sold, the variable profit, and the sales variance are all from my chart.
Yes.
My operating statement.
Yes. Advertising, I see that's well down.
We're well down on that. They come up here. There's quite a saving on that due to the changeover in the promotions.
Now we come to your fixed expenses, Bill, as you say. What's happening here? You're down on that. Down on repairs. That's good.
I think I should point out, Mr. Chairman, that the 5,000 on repairs is not really a true saving. All we've done is to delay the expenditure in time, and we'll no doubt spend this probably next quarter.
Right, fair enough. And then down at the bottom here, Jim, you're quite a bit up, aren't you, on your budget?
Yes, this is mainly the National Sales Conference, Harry, which we held at the beginning of January to launch our new marketing policies, you remember?
Didn't we budget for that then?
No, we hadn't budgeted for that.
Oh, it's a pity. Anything else?
Oh yes, there's the 2 extra sales supervisors that we took on.
What 2 sales supervisors?
Oh, I told you about these as we were, just after the sales conference, as we were catching the train to come home.
About 10 o'clock at night, I suppose.
About 10:30, I suppose it was, yes.
Well, in future, Jim, if you want me to agree to any increase in staff, would you ask me in office hours?
Yes, of course, Mr. Chairman.
Right.
I presume you're going to talk to us about administration, Mr. Chairman? And you seem to have sort of ignored this so far.
Yes. We're up against budget, I'm afraid. Now, I've had a look at this. I thought you might ask this question, and I think there are 2 basic reasons. The first one is quite a strange one. We seem to have had rather more entertaining of head office visitors than I'd anticipated. I don't know why. And you remember that we put in the budget something for altering our offices? You know,
yes,
the redecoration of yours. And,
yes.
Well, you know, you were a bit fussy, weren't you? And I'm sorry to say that the decorations cost rather more than we thought. And then, of course, we thought we needed 1 or 2 other improvements. And that's just about accounts for it.
Well, offices are very nice.
Yes. I was going to say that it was money well spent, because they are quite magnificent now.
Good job.
So, there we are. Now, what are these figures? These are the phased figures, aren't they, on the right-hand side?
Yes, these are the sales figures as per my phased sales budget.
And this is interesting, that according to the phased budget, we should have made a loss of 84,000. And we have in fact made a loss of 42,000.
I think we could be congratulated on this.
Twice as good as we expected to be.
Possibly, but I think we'd be better employed in making sure that we do eventually hit our profit targets by the time we come to the end of the year.
Excuse me, Mr. McWhirter's on the telephone. He says it's urgent. Will you take the call now?
Yes, please, Sandra. Yes.
I wonder what Jock wants.
Yes.
Would you put the call through,
Strange.
please?
If there are no mistakes on the figures.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello? Yes, Jock? Oh? I don't remember that figure. On one of the... Oh, it must be the one we haven't looked at yet. Thank you. We'll look at it. Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you.
Well, that was Jock to say that he prepared, one of the statements he prepared for us, which he sent us this morning, was one showing how we are likely to come out at the end of the year, so far as he can judge it now. Now, unfortunately, somebody from head office has had a look at this statement, and we may get one or two awkward questions asked. Well, I think we'd better look at this chart right away and make sure we know what the answers are.
Well, at least it was wise of Jock to let us know, anyway.
Yes. Now, here you see is the crux of the matter. You remember the yield on capital we budgeted was 5%, wasn't it, before tax, or 2.5% after tax? Well, he's estimated we're going to come out at 1.5%.
I think the problem here, Harry, is that there are two factors to consider. Firstly, we've got this drop in profit
Yeah.
on the one hand, and also we've got this increase in capital employed.
Quite.
So we've got to
It's gone
consider
up
both by 2 million.
by 2 million, in
Yes.
effect.
On the trading profit, and incidentally I notice it's shown as trading profit after tax, where we've been looking at before tax figures previously, I think Jock has taken a rather pessimistic view as a result of some comments I made to him about the Y2 position, where we've been falling a little behind on our sales. But I don't think his pessimism is justified. It's too early to take this view, and I still think we can catch up.
Well, I'll have to watch it, obviously. Now, capital employed has gone up by 200,000 on plant and equipment, Bill.
I don't think this is difficult to explain, Harry. You remember that we did have a meeting to decide about capital budgeting,
Yes.
and we agreed to do this on a continuous basis.
Yes.
You know, each
yeah,
quarter
yeah.
looking a year forward. Well, now, in the course of this, we've found that we bring forward the expenditure on product Z equipment, and this, I think, accounts for this 200,000.
I see. Right. Stocks are up by the large sum of 900,000.
This is presumably both raw materials and finished
Yes,
products.
I think that Jock is taking a rather unrealistic view of this, because we are at the moment at a peak, I think. We've got all these stocks for the Product X launch. You know, this is the promotion that we've got on. And I think that, coupled with the fairly high raw material stocks at the moment, this is accounting for it. Now, once we get this scientific inventory control system operating, you know, with exponential smoothing, I think we shall be able to bring this stock level down.
Well, we'll certainly watch this one very closely. Now, debtors, they're up also enormously.
Well, as you know, Harry, we've been concentrating very much recently on getting our new sales programs going, and we haven't really had time to get down to the question of tightening up on the credit control, so that we're still running at the old levels. But I'm quite sure that long before the end of this year, when we've got a bit more of time to tackle this problem, there's plenty of scope here to bring it down.
I see. Yes. Now, creditors, on the other hand, those are less than we expected. And I think there the answer is that we've been paying off our creditors too early. This is something I want to follow up. Well, the net result is that we are, as you say, we're 2 million up on our capital employed.
Mind you, I think that Jock is deliberately taking a pessimistic view here for one purpose, and that is to stimulate some action in this field.
He's made the worst of everything,
Yes, he
hasn't
has.
Well, it may be so. Yes. Well, gentlemen, in winding up this meeting, there are just two things I'd like to say. The first is that a statement of this type, even although it's only an estimate, I think is a most valuable piece of management information, as it serves as a warning. Now, secondly, I'd like to get from both of you in writing, a statement of what action you propose to take to ensure that we do achieve our marketing and production targets by the end of the year, while at the same time keeping our capital employed under control. Now, if you've got any doubts at all, if you've got any reservations as to whether or not we're going to hit our targets this year, I'd like to know that now, so that we can make quite sure that our plans, our forward plans, are realistic.
You want to update these as we go
Yes,
along?
yes. So, will you please let me have this information by Friday week?
Yes, yes.
All right.
Sir.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Well, that was the first time we've used the new type of control information. I think the confusion caused by the two types of budget comparison, pro rata and phased, demonstrates the importance of having a single system of control rather than several. But if duplication is unavoidable, then management must understand what the control figures mean. Of course, we all realize that the type of variance analysis which Bill is now getting is going to be helpful in improving productivity. In Bill's own words, we will now know where profits and losses are arising and who is responsible. Jim's sales variance analysis is going to be equally informative, and I intend to see that in future we get a similar control over his expenses. You may think it was quite inexcusable the way I appeared to resist any detailed probe into administrative costs. But in fact, I have taken action, and an investigation by specialists with a view to reducing costs is now underway. So we end almost as we began, looking ahead and deciding what corrective action to take, only this time basing our decisions on properly designed management information.
Well, that's the end of Unimix. Unfortunately, we shall never know if the corrective action the board is planning will bring them back on course. But I'm glad to see that they did finally recognize that success depends not only on hitting profit targets, but also on keeping both fixed and working capital under control, so that the overall return on capital employed is maximized. The four parts of this film have attempted to illustrate a system of management information relating to the business as a whole and its use by functional management and the board. Reference has also been made to various management techniques and the part they can play in helping management. I hope that the central theme of using properly designed management information will be helpful to you in considering the kinds of facts and figures you need in your own business. If it has succeeded in this, the film has served its purpose.